Hello, everybody. I'm Aidan Maloney. I'm the Wellbeing Services Manager here at the University of Law. My role involves overseeing our counselling, welfare, mental health, and accommodation support. Uh, we form part of the wider student support services, along with study skills, money and housing advice, and our disability support and inclusion services. And we work closely with all the other departments across the university to ensure that there's an integrated support system in place for our students to help maximize your experience while you're studying with us here at the university and to prepare you well for your future careers and your life generally. Now, I'm a firm believer in providing support to individuals who may be struggling with barriers to study or in the workplace, whether they're around relationships, physical or mental health, financial struggles, or for whatever reasons there may be. We have services here at the university for staff and for students, and we have individuals whose sole purpose it is to support our students to maximize a positive university experience. But we also take a proactive approach in promoting messages around good mental health, taking care of ourselves, looking after our own and others' well-being, and being mindful of each other, which is very much what tonight's event is all about. Now, mental health and well-being are intrinsically bound up with physical health and well-being, and both are impacted by our physical and social surroundings. So we can't afford to ignore or neglect any of these areas. Life is a rich tapestry of interwoven strands. Support seeking and self care are ways to stop the threads unraveling. So, welcome to our Give Time to Talk, Take Time to Listen event. I'm very happy that the Wellbeing Services have worked with the Student Union to present this important topic. And I'm really grateful to our speakers for coming along this evening to give their views on this topic. And I'm really pleased that you've decided to join us this evening, as I assume from your presence that being open to discussing mental health and being receptive to these conversations are as important for you as they are for us here at the university. So how are you? Well, if, like me, when people ask that question, you go, fine, thanks, all good, busy. But following up with well, how are you really? Is quite a simple and effective opener or invitation to talk about things that may be impacting on our mental health and well-being. Extending that invitation or that opportunity to speak about how we really are is the impetus for today's event. Also, sometimes when we talk about mental health, our tendency is to conflate this with mental illness or mental disorder, or whatever phrases we use to describe a shift from a sense of mental ease to unease or distress. We shouldn't be reluctant to talk about mental health because we all have mental health and it fluctuates depending on our personal circumstances. So perhaps what we mean is, for whatever reason, we may be reluctant to talk about mental ill health because it can be an uncomfortable topic for those of us who hear somebody else talking about their mental ill health. We may, for example, be concerned about saying or doing the wrong thing. Or for those of us who are experiencing mental ill health, we may be worried about perceiving ourselves as a burden on other people, or we may be worried about how they may react to what we have to say. Or we may simply think, what's the point? Before we begin tonight's discussion, I want to say, if you're affected by any of the topics raised this evening, please do avail of the range of support available here at the university for staff and for students. All of us speaking this evening will be happy to talk with you and or point you in the right direction to talk to others. So now I'd like to ask our panel to introduce themselves. I'll call on them in alphabetical order. We also have a member of our student support team, Jess, who's one of our mental health specialists, and she'll introduce herself as well. Unfortunately, Emily, our recent graduate, cannot attend this evening because of a work commitment. After the speakers have introduced themselves, they'll each talk about their reasons for being here this evening and why this topic is important for them. And we'll then follow that with an opportunity for questions and answers and open up the discussion more widely. So thanks again. I'd now like to call upon Dan to introduce himself.
Thanks, Aidan. Yeah, I'm Daniel Finlay, and I'm the Students' Union President at the University of Law. I've been in this position since July.
Thank you, Daniel. Emma, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emma, and I'm the Students' Union Executive Officer. Alongside managing the day-to-day operations of the Students' Union and supporting our staff, I also provide advice and support to students through our Student Advice Centre. I'm one of the youngest members of staff within the university, at just 25. I know a lot of people say that I look a lot younger than that. I often get mistaken for a student. I've been with ULaw for almost a year now.
Thank you, Emma. Kaylee, hi, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, so I'm Kaylee. I'm a senior tutor at the Leeds campus, so I teach on both postgrad and undergraduate courses. I'm also pastoral head for the LPC, GDL, MA and the new conversion courses as well. So that's sort of helping our staff support our students in terms of, checking in with them and making sure that they have the support and the information that they need. But yeah, before that, I was a practicing lawyer at a well-known international law firm, and then took the time to assess, is that what I wanted to do anymore? And thought actually teaching is probably more for me. So I've been with ULaw 4 years now.
Thank you, Kelly. Patrick, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Aidan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Patrick Johnson. I'm Director of EDI at the University of Law. I'm also a member of the Executive Board, and my responsibilities cover sort of, as well as EDI, widening participation in the sort of student support services as well. I'm also a Disabled Students Commissioner as well. So I'm one of 8 commissioners who has a remit to sort of challenge and support the higher education sector to hopefully achieve more sort of positive outcomes for disabled students.
Thank you, Patrick. And hi, Jess from our support services. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, yep. So my name's Jess. I'm one of the mental health advisors here at the University of Law, mental health department. I cover the northern campuses, so Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle, Liverpool, Chester. My job role basically involves supporting students with any mental health concerns, ensuring that they're getting the appropriate support from the university and also from external support services, and then just providing them with general kind of like coping strategies and tips on how to manage their mental health. So I'll be here today to kind of be involved in the Q&A and also to keep an eye on the chat box.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everybody. And I hope that the presence of our speakers and the range of roles they play within the university will give you an idea of how important this topic is, from our frontline support services, academic and teaching staff, the student union, right through to at an executive level, that this integration of our attention to mental health and well-being cuts right across the whole university for us. So having said that, I'd like to call on Daniel again and to talk to us a little bit more about why you've come along this evening to talk about this subject.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aidan. Yes, as I said before, I'm Daniel Finlay and I'm the Students' Union President. Apologies if my screen is small or distorted. I've had to log on my phone because my laptop decided not to like Zoom today. But that being said, I was elected by the student body last April to represent students' views over the next academic year. I'm a former ULaw student, having completed my LLB and BPc over the last 4 years. I've experienced both in-person and online teaching at 2 different campuses. I've lived that transition of having an active and social university experience to one that felt quite isolating and distant, a transition that I'm sure most of you have experienced as well, whether you come from a sixth form or from another university, another college, or you've transitioned from year 1 to year 2. This new learning experience at home, it was convenient at first. It meant that I got an extra 30 minutes in bed. It also meant that I saved on travel costs too, but it soon became rather difficult, and as it did for my friends and colleagues too. Throughout the pandemic, I saw many of them struggle with their studies and their mental health. This is why I stood on the manifesto aim of promoting student mental health by giving students greater access to services and facilities, whether you are an online student or a campus-based student. I'm therefore really glad to see this event going ahead today, and I hope that you do find it supportive, encouraging, and informative. I still believe that in industries such as law and business, despite greater policies in place in the industry and in the university, there's still a deep-rooted belief amongst students and aspiring lawyers, aspiring businessmen and women, that a person who wants to be successful in these careers should refrain from talking about their mental health. They shouldn't bring it up. They should put it on the back burner. This should not be the case. We all will experience poor mental health in our lifetimes, and it's crucial that at these times we are comfortable in seeking the help that we need, employing the techniques techniques that we need to get ourselves back into a good place. This event today, it might not get rid of that stigma for you. However, what I do hope it does do is resonate with you. So if you ever come across a situation where you need to think back about another person's experience and how they resolved a situation, you can do so from this talk. Like many aspiring lawyers, I like to talk. I like to, as many of my colleagues would say, and anyone who knows me, I like to talk a lot. I like to connect with new people, and I like to socialize too. As I'm sure you'll experience too, once the pandemic struck, all that disappeared. No longer could we go for a coffee after the lecture had finished. No longer could we go for a coffee to talk about aspects of the lecture that we were unsure of. No longer could we knock on the tutor's door to discuss a point that we were unsure of too. We all soon felt isolated. And as I was working from my bedroom too, my room became somewhat of a study prison. It was my relaxation space, but it was also my workspace as well. So I wanted to talk for a short time today about the strategies I used and implemented that helped me stay on track during my time at ULaw, particularly in the last sort of 12 months. This brings me on to my first key piece of advice, really. And if there's anything you take away from my talk today, it's this, and it's that your downtime is equally as important as your study time. I know from personal experience that when I have looming deadlines and paperwork to do, or I've got a lot of revision to do, the last thing I think I should be doing is walking away. It seems often used to seem counterproductive to me to go and have lunch with friends, to watch that episode on Netflix, or to get some exercise. But building in these activities into your daily schedule will really help you in the long run. Often you'll come back to your studies feeling energized and more productive. From studying at home, I know how difficult it has been to separate the personal space from the relaxation space. And at times, as I mentioned before, it felt like a study prison. But when I got to that point, when I stopped, retaining that information, you always get to that point where you've been revising for so long and things just aren't sticking no matter how many times you go over it. I stopped, I put my headphones on, and I went outside. I went for a walk. I jumped on my bike, and actually building in these physical activities as well really helped with my mood as well. So I didn't believe it at first, but I was just like, oh, they say exercise, you'll feel great afterwards. During it, you don't. But actually afterwards, you do get that good feeling, and that really helped me throughout my studies, and when it prevented me from burning out on many occasions. Equally, as places began to open up again, I wanted to hang out with my friends because I hadn't seen them in so long, like I'm sure many of you wanted to as well. However, I said yes to these invitations, but throughout the time that I was with them, I felt almost guilty I felt guilty for being out. I felt guilty for trying to enjoy myself, and my mind was constantly on my work. And I wasn't too sure how to get around this, because obviously, I wanted a break, but if my mind's on my work, well, what's the point? I might as well just still be studying. But if I knew I had a piece of work in the evening and somebody asked me to go for a drink or go for a coffee, I'd say, well, I'll go out for a couple of hours, but that's it. And I'd make sure that for those couple of hours, I didn't think about work. So rather than going out for the whole evening, try and I tried to organize my time where I was strict with myself. So I made sure that those 2 hours were for enjoyment. And therefore, rather than going out for the whole evening, I still had time to do some work upon my return. Another tip which worked for me. So I don't know how many of you drink coffee out there, but I used to drink a lot of coffee. And actually during stressful and anxious periods, that does have quite a negative impact. It can often, especially when you're stressed, it can increase symptoms. So although I'm not saying give up coffee, and I still need one in the morning, but try and ease the amount of caffeine that you're taking in throughout the day. That's helped me to stay more calm and relaxed when I'm studying. Just a couple of other points from me. Mindfulness techniques have been proven to help solve stress. I always thought at first, well, how's an app gonna make me feel better? How's an app gonna help me with this stress? But we have funded memberships for students, and these apps have been shown to help people stress less, focus more, and sleep better. And that's another important point as well. Getting a good night's sleep, really does help, because there were times where I think, oh, I'll just get up early and do that piece of work, or I'll work a bit later into the evening. But making sure you give yourself 7 or 8 hours means that you're actually more productive throughout the next day. And then finally, and the reason why we are all here today is actually talking about how you're feeling as well. I opened up to a few of my classmates about the stress I was feeling with the course, and actually it was almost like a breath of fresh air for them, because they were able to relate to the exact same things that I was talking about. And then we talked out how we were getting around it, how we were feeling, and we really helped each other get through it. So don't be afraid to reach out to your classmates, because it won't only help you, but it will also help them, because it only takes one person to speak up, and everybody and the people go, oh yeah, I feel like that too. Oh yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I'm going through. So that's my sort of last key piece of advice, and probably the most important is don't be afraid to utilize your friends, especially your classmates too, who are going through the same experiences of you. And if it's an experience outside the course, reach out to your family, because in most cases they've just got your best interest at heart. So I don't know if I'm over my time, Aidan, but that's my talk for today. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them afterwards.
Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. And that's a story that certainly resonates with me, and I'm sure with Jess as well, in the support teams, where we hear these struggles that students have with that balance between their academic and social lives. And I was really struck by that term, a study prison. That's quite a strong phrase, and conjures up all kinds of images for me. But I was really glad to hear that you've found that liberating key to success. And when I use the word success, I'm not talking just about academic grades or, career success, but being a successful, rounded human being and having that balance and discovering the importance of self-care and self-managing your time around things. And I'm struck by that demarcation of your time, making sure you've built in that time for yourself into your routine as well. So thanks a lot for that, Daniel. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd now like to hear from Emma, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this evening, so it's lovely to see you all. I'm going to be sharing some of my personal experiences over the past few years with you. I hope that by talking openly about these topics, others might feel less worried about sharing their own thoughts. But firstly, I'd like to say that this is the first time I've ever spoken about my mental health struggles in a work environment, and I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't a little bit nervous tonight. Before I talk more about my thoughts and experiences, I just want to give a quick content warning. I am going to be talking about depression, suicide, panic attacks, and psychosis. So please do look after yourself if any of these things fall close to home. So if you'd said to me 10 years ago that I would have spent the majority of my 20s under the care of mental health teams, I probably would have told you you've got the wrong person. I've always been extremely high functioning, high achieving, and extroverted. And in my eyes, I didn't fit the profile of someone who would later reach such low points in their life that they would consider an attempt taking their own life. So let me take you back to May 2016, which seems like a million years ago now. I was coming to the end of my second year of my degree. I was under a lot of stress with exams, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. I wasn't particularly enjoying my degree, and I was experiencing some relationship difficulties as well as some physical health issues. And all of this culminated in my first suicide attempt on the 10th of May, 12 hours before my first exam of the season. I don't believe I'd showed any hints of struggling before then. Although now I think of it, my newly occurring daily panic attacks probably should have given me away a little bit. I was running a charity. I was part of multiple societies, and I was holding down two part-time jobs that I absolutely loved. I don't think I even really recognised where I was mentally until that night. I attended my exam the next day, which I failed, unsurprisingly, and then tried to seek the help of our local mental health services. It was my first ever contact with mental health services, and unfortunately, it wasn't a good one. The services that I've been in contact with more recently have been excellent, but unfortunately, that first contact wasn't the best that it could have been. I was turned away because of the underlying factors I mentioned earlier. I was high achieving, high functioning. I had a big friendship circle, several hobbies, and 2 jobs. Instead, I was directed towards an art therapy class to make fish out of recycled milk bottles, which I did go to once. 3 months later, I made the decision to drop out of my course. This, for me, was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And it removed a lot of stress from my life and meant that I was able to concentrate on volunteering and doing work that I enjoyed. And there began my career within higher education. And I've not really looked back since, to be honest. Instead, I've concentrated on professional qualifications, and I'm now in the middle of a level 7 course in leadership and management. 2 years later, I moved from the quiet seaside town of Aberystwyth, where I'd spent the past 4 years of my life, and to busy Birmingham, which is where I live now. This was a huge culture shock for me, and I moved to a city where I didn't really know anybody. A variety of factors, including loneliness, meant that in the first 6 months of living in Birmingham, I had 3 more suicide attempts, and I was sectioned under Section 17 of the Mental Health Act. That's only something that I've been able to admit to very, very recently. During a lot of this time, I spent most nights at a community mental health centre not far from work. Work was and always has been a stabilising coping mechanism for me. Not always a good one, but it has always been a coping mechanism. I find that throwing myself into work provides a welcome distraction from my own thoughts, keeps me grounded, and it gives structure to my week. Because of this, I was granted daily leave from hospital from 8 till 6, which headed to the ward at night. I hid all of this from my manager and colleagues, and I worked 10+ hour days to compensate for any concerning vibes that I might have been giving off, which in hindsight probably wasn't a good way to go about things. And I wish that I'd had the confidence then to talk about how I felt. To this day, nobody that I worked with at the time knows about this, unless they're here today, obviously. So 6 months after coming to Birmingham to work at another university, I met my partner, now fiance, which coincided with my mental health starting to improve after months of being heavily medicated and twice weekly counselling. And that counselling was definitely the best experience and best kind of support that I've had in terms of managing my conditions. I was actually late for our first date with my partner because I just spent 2 hours in my doctor's surgery having a bit of a meltdown. We laugh at it now, but it was so normal for me at the time to go from being in a crisis situation to pretending that everything was entirely normal. At the time, I was hugely ashamed that I couldn't cope, and I tried to hide this from everybody except a few close friends. The next few months were a little less traumatic. I was discharged from hospital and my Section 17 was removed. I continued to have weekly counselling, and that was incredibly helpful and certainly helped to turn things around for me. In December 2019, my fiance and I welcomed our beautiful daughter, Matilda, to the world. She's now almost 2, which has gone unbelievably quickly. And what unfolded over the next couple of months after she was born was one of the most confusing experiences of my life, I think, and one which has made me even more thankful than I already was for the NHS. So we always knew that I was at quite a high risk of postnatal depression, given my mental health history, and it was something that we'd prepared for as much as we could. My daughter was born on Christmas Eve, which she's going to hate us for when she's older. And when my partner went back to work 4 weeks later, I started to have some strange experiences, which I now know to have been brief episodes of postpartum psychosis. The first occasion was when I got up in the middle of the night to feed my daughter, and I could see the dinosaurs on her onesie moving all over her. I had several similar experiences over the next few weeks, with the final straw being that I was convinced that my daughter had been replaced with a doll to test my parenting skills. And I was convinced that there were men in our house that had come to take my daughter away. All of this was obviously completely absurd, but I believed it with every inch of my being at the time. I'm extremely grateful for my partner, who fought for me to get the support that I needed at a time when I couldn't. And after lots and lots of fighting and advocating for me, we finally got me a bed on an inpatient psychiatric unit. I was in a normal adult unit for 3 days before being moved to a specialist mother and baby unit for 5 weeks. The support that I got in that mother and baby unit was something I'll never forget. They helped me bond with my daughter, and they supported my whole family through what was an incredibly stressful time. My daughter's 2 next month, and with ongoing support, I have been fairly stable for the past 18 months. There's still a huge amount of stigma attached to mental health, and I still put some of those stigmas on myself. For example, I hate using the phrase psychotic when describing my periods of postpartum psychosis. I also hate the phrases sectioned and detained, because I think in my head, those phrases are associated with something that I never thought I'd experience. I never thought I'd become a psychiatric patient, and I'm still working through accepting that period of my life. The most important lesson I've learned through all of my therapy is that it's not your fault, and something that I still have to remind myself of regularly, but that's true. We know that most mental illnesses occur as a result of altered brain chemistry, which could be down to a range of things. For me, it's been the result of emotional traumas in my childhood, and in the case of my postpartum illnesses, the result of huge sudden changes in hormones. Struggling with your mental health doesn't make you any less likely to be successful. If you recognise any of this within yourselves, please don't tell yourself that story, because the more you tell yourself that story, the more likely it is to come true. We all tell ourselves stories about ourselves, what we're good at, what we're not, what other people might think of us, but don't let this be a story that you tell yourself. I've gone through much of my adult life so far telling myself that if I opened up about my experiences, that I wouldn't be seen as successful or strong or knowledgeable or intelligent. And it's taken me a while to realise that that's not the case. And I hope at least that that's not true. I think if I have one piece of advice or a main message to give you this evening, it would be to be brave. If you're struggling to tell someone, I won't be the only one sat in this room tonight between staff and students that recognise at least some of what I've spoken about. We do tend to shy away from sharing things like this, but many of us have been through very difficult and emotionally challenging things in our lives and experience mental health difficulties, and therefore will understand. I know it's really easy when you're in such a difficult place to think that you're the only person who's experiencing that thing, but that's not the case. When you find the right person who listens, it can make a world of difference. And although we may not be able to fix it, talking to somebody who can offer a listening ear can be really beneficial. As I said, this is the first time I've ever spoken about this openly in any environment, but least of all at work. So I hope that by sharing some of my story, I would have helped at least one person feel a little bit more confident about opening up about their own experiences and to seek help and support, as difficult as that might seem at the moment. So go for it. Be brave, be outrageous, and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's such a powerful story. And yes, you are successful in many, many ways. The word that came into my mind immediately when you started speaking was congratulations. And that just increased throughout your story. So many wonderful things, your engagement, the birth of your child, and, but your courage and generosity in sharing your story this evening, first and foremost. And yes, I think this will be very helpful for others who experience similar things. And I think that important message, although we all have unique stories to tell, the things you described are more and more well understood. And I'm sorry to hear you had such negative experiences to begin with, but we're learning to understand these more and more, and support is getting better. So that message about people reaching out and asking for that support, I think, is a really important one and a really good thing for you to share with us this evening. I was also struck when you talked about your perception of the expectations of other people on you and trying to live up to those expectations as well. And we hear a lot about that in our services, about whether that's coming from parents or partners or, other professionals in the workplace or whatever. It's those additional burdens, I think, that we place on ourselves from time to time play a big part as well. And I could see messages of support coming up in the chat box. You may not have had a chance to see those yet. And I've saw several emojis coming up of people sending out their support to you as well. So thanks for that, Emma. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, Kaylee, hi. If we could hear from you on why you're here this evening and why this is important for you.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, though, I just want to start off by saying well done, Emma. Yeah, I mean, I was nearly tearing up actually listening to you. So that was super brave, and you should be extremely proud of yourself for being able to do that. So why am I here today, guys? I'm sort of going to split mine into sort of two halves, really. Firstly, about my experience as a student. And it was a while ago now. So I sort of graduated undergrad in 2009. And then I went to what was the College of Law in York for my LPC. I'm going to talk to you about what my student life was like. And then going into my career and how now I feel I have a handle on my mental health and how I try to help others within work and outside of work as well. So much like the characteristics that Daniel has mentioned and Emma, I was always sort of very committed as a student. In fact, I'm still extremely, almost sometimes a bit ridiculously committed, even as an employee. I was a perfectionist, or I am a perfectionist. Everything had to be of a certain standard. It was my success at school was always attached to my self-worth. And I constantly pushed myself. A lot to do with, I think, whilst I came from a very loving family, due to a dynamic in a step-parent relationship, I felt like maybe at home I wasn't valued that much. So at school, that was the one place for me where I could really shine. And you know, I had a very good relationship with all my teachers. My dad, on parents' evening, he wouldn't have been able to ever shy away from how well I had done. So it was the one place I sort of got the credit that I knew I deserved. And that then sort of morphed even further to, you know, doing extremely well, getting extremely good grades, getting into a Russell Group university up at Newcastle to study law, being the first ever person in my family to go to university, and doing so whilst holding down jobs and not having any financial help from my family, the biggest, you know, loan I could get. But even then, when I was at university, nothing was ever enough. You know, I could always do better. I could always spend more time doing something. In my first year, I remember maybe going out 6 or 7 times in the whole year. Whereas if, you know, most people are like freshers, you know, your freshers year, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. And I just constantly self-berated whenever I was spending time away from my work. But I could always get a grip on it. You know, sometimes I'd get really, really stressed around exam periods, but I could always pull it back. There was always something that enabled me to pull it back, like this extra level of resilience. And then in my second year, at the end of my second year, I got my training contract for the firm Pinsent Masons. And I went back one of 5 people into third year with a training contract. And it almost added an unbearable amount of pressure to me. Whereas if a lot of people, and rightly so, feel the pressure when they don't have a training contract, having the training contract and the fear of losing that training contract then added an extra layer for me of, well, that's it, I must just work all the time. And I had an interesting relationship with coffee as well, Daniel, in my third year. It was used often at like 1, 2 in the morning to try and keep awake. And by the end of my when it was my finals coming up, I was basically operating on 2 hours sleep for near 9 months a night. And I remember this one weekend and I felt so ill. And now I know that it was panic attacks. But at the time, I didn't know what it was because I could always pull it back. There was always that little bit left. But no matter what I did, nothing I had in me. I couldn't pull it back. And I remember all night, one night, just being in such a mess and writing letters for all my housemates in the morning with outside their doors, because I left the house at 6 saying, I've gone to the doctors, I'm outside doctor's surgery, I need to get an appointment. And nobody understood it. It was 2009. Like, we didn't speak openly about it. And my friend, I remember, she threw on her clothes and ran down into Newcastle city centre to meet me. And I'm teaching now at Newcastle. We've just opened our Newcastle campus. And I walked past the other day the coffee shop that we went into and had hot chocolates on the morning whilst I was waiting for my doctor's appointment. And it made me smile, thinking about how far I'd come. Because after that breakdown, which was a breakdown, I went home for a week before my exams. And then I came back on a daily basis to sit my exams. And I managed to sit them and get through them and thought, that's it, it's done. And I thought it wouldn't happen again. And then it did happen again at law school. And then it did happen again 5 years into my career. And I think the biggest thing that I realized was my personality traits are very much, and I've spoken about this a lot before, so apologies, Aidan, because you've heard this sort of stuff before from me, but what makes us successful as lawyers, as law students, as practicing lawyers, are those high functioning traits. It's those perfectionists, the commitment, the dedication, the nothing is ever enough, the focusing on the negatives, the berating ourselves because it's not good enough. Those exact characteristics, attention to detail, all of that make us excellent lawyers. But they are also the very same things that research has shown exacerbate mental illness or mental health. So this is why when you look at the profession, specifically legal career, it's high up there in terms of the mental health connection. So after I left my job at Pinson's, and it was to do with my mental health, and at the time I felt there was very little support available. It was almost like we were replaceable. After spending all this money on a trainee and getting them qualified, no longer were they necessary when their mental health was at a certain point. And I went away and had a career break, and I came back to ULaw, and I decided when I walked into ULaw, I was always going to be open about my mental health. And I have been, and everybody always knows. And if I'm having a day where I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm so stressed, I don't know what I'm doing, people know. And I'm glad, because before my probationary period was up, I had another breakdown and I had to have 5 weeks off ULaw. And that was mortifying because I was in my first 6 months of a job. So I was on probation and I was panicking that people didn't know me well enough to understand that I'm a good worker, I'm a good colleague, I work hard. And 4 years down the line, well, 3.5, it's like I've never not been here. These are my family, these people, and my colleagues many of my colleagues have since struggled with their mental health. And I openly speak with them as well about their mental health, and they've come to me now. So personally, that's my sort of personal side. And I'm currently doing my PGCHE at the moment, and my report stage of that master's is based on the link between our characteristics and mental health. And I've recently sent a questionnaire out, you may well have seen it, I don't know, to do with this. And I'm going to be interested to see what the results show as our studies continue, what our mental health does. But just to finish off, I think it's really important for us as students now to understand that this industry is becoming more open, and the very firm that I was with has been a front runner in what is known as the Mindful Business Charter. And that is about addressing how firms work and expectations, and being open about mental health, and saying if something is an unreasonable deadline, and looking after your colleagues. And the industry is changing. It's slow and it's not going to be overnight, but it is for us at a law school, us as your tutors, you as our students, to talk about it and support it, because you are our next generation, guys. And it's for you as our next generation to drive this change into the legal career so that we can continue to speak openly about this. And I also just think just to finish off, how excellent it is that you've turned up tonight to speak about what can be a difficult topic and to listen about what can be often difficult, because that very fact means, as Aidan said, you're open to this topic, and we need people like you to speak openly and think openly to get this topic out there and offer the support people need. So well done.
Thank you very much indeed, Kaylee. I really must clear up one point before moving on, and that's I never tire of hearing you speak. So thank you very much for coming along this evening and sharing your story and your experiences as well. I'm really pleased to hear that attitudes in the profession and concern for their staff's mental health and well-being has improved across the profession. And I've certainly been part of some of those discussions, and heard you speak about the business charter as well. So that's really reassuring to hear that message. Also very pleased to hear your positive experience of perceptions here at the University of Law around your mental health and well-being as well, because that's certainly been my experience since I joined the university back in 2017 as a mental health advisor, and staff talking to me about their experiences as well. So there's always been that openness to talk about issues from some of the staff here, and that's really good to see that continuing. Also very pleased to hear that you can be an informal support to your colleagues as well who may be struggling with issues themselves. So that's some really positive messages there, and thanks again, Kelly. Okay, Patrick, call upon you now to please tell us why you're here this evening.
Thanks, Aidan. I suppose I first want to say thank you. It's been really powerful to listen to everyone talk this evening, and I'm sort of really grateful to you for being so open and honest about your experiences, which is obviously the whole point of this event today. And I think that this can actually help, by talking, can help to sort of dispel some of those sort of misconceptions about mental health conditions as well. In terms of me coming here today, I thought it was really important for the university through the executive board to show our support for mental well-being for both students and staff, and that's my sort of main reason for being here. And it's really great that I can see also here as the Deputy Vice Chancellor as well, and I think that's just an indication that shows how important this is to us as an institution. I think mental wellness has really been heightened, and Daniel mentioned this, particularly over the last sort of 18-24 months with the impact of COVID. And I know that I saw the sort of National Union of Students found that 52% of students described their sort of current mental health and well-being as worse compared with their life before the pandemic. I think this is similar to the sort of the general population, and we can assume therefore for our staff as well. So it's really important, I think, to talk about this. I think it's also fair to say, and I think a number of people have mentioned this, that there's a stigma attached to mental health or poor mental health. And I think knowing that I was going to be here this evening, I thought it'd be really interesting to have a look at the web and to see what messages they were putting out about mental health. And if you sort of go to Google, and you may have done this already, and you ask for words to sort of describe mental health, it comes up with synonyms for mental illness, and they sort of, what they describe is sort of quite shocking. It uses words like insanity, lunacy, craziness, derangement, disturbed mind. So this is obviously not helpful when we want people to open up and talk about the challenges that they have. So for me, I think it's about ensuring that at ULaw we're creating the right environment, and by that I mean an inclusive one, so one where everyone feel that they can flourish and achieve their potential. And it's great listening to Emma and Kaylee and the support that they felt that they've had from colleagues at ULaw. And so creating this sort of the right environment, I think, can help us support everyone's well-being. And that's what we're talking about in terms of everyone at ULaw, the whole community. And Aidan touched on this before, because he talked about mental health is sort of it's part of life, and we will all at different times be somewhere on that sort of spectrum in terms of our mental health and well-being. So how do we actually ensure that we're considering and supporting everyone? So we do need to continue to raise awareness, and this evening is, as I say, a great example of that. And it's about talking and listening to others about their lived experiences and trying to better understand where people are and why they're behaving in a particular way. Because I think that that's sort of part of it, in terms of that listening and talking can sort of help us to sort of better understand and then provide appropriate supports. But as well as raising awareness, we also need to make sure that we have the right support services in place as well. So that when someone does reach out for support, we're there for them and we're able to signpost them or provide help and supports. And I suppose for me, I'm really proud of the mental health and wellbeing services that we do have at ULaw. I've been here 10 months now, and I think coming and seeing the services that are available, certainly looking at other institutions, I don't see the same level of support. And I think for me, one of the things that I'm really proud of in terms of ULaw is that it does put students and staff at the heart of what it does. But I think I wanted to also, I suppose, touch upon considering things from an intersectionality perspective as well. So for me, we also need to think about the impact on someone's mental health if they're a member of the LGBTQ plus community, because we know there are lots of issues with mental health there, and also thinking about men who struggle to talk about how they feel. Think about ethnic minorities and so on. So we really need to be aware and ready to listen and provide relevant and appropriate support to a range of different people. So the important thing is to know that, I suppose, at ULaw, there are many really experienced people that you can talk to and who are here to help and support and not to judge, importantly, not to judge. And I hope just knowing that someone is there and ready to listen can be a source of help as well. And I think that's come through this evening. So it's important for us, I suppose, that we work to eliminate this sort of stigma associated with mental ill health, and we positively promote mental well-being for everyone. So really thank you, I suppose, to everyone who's spoken this evening. It has been incredibly powerful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thanks for that. And I'm really pleased to hear you say how positively you viewed the support services when you joined the university, because I've heard that from other new staff who've joined us as well, who've commented on the range of support that we have here at the university. Maybe for those of us who've been here longer, we start to take that for granted. So it really is reassuring to hear that from staff who've joined us more recently. Interesting also your comment around the statistics, because we hear that 1 in 4 of us at some point in our lives can experience issues around our mental health or experience mental illness. And I think the important message from events like this is that 4 in 4 of us can offer support and be helpful, if only by just being a listening ear, but often we can do much more than that as well. Also really important to highlight that about the stigmatizing language that's out there. And it's interesting to hear about your Google search and what are being put forward as synonyms for mental health are actually mental illness terms. So yeah, really positive messages there. And again, as I said at the start, I feel really privileged to work in a university where this is taken seriously from the executive right down through all the staff here and the student body as well. Patrick used the word community. That's what I feel we are here at the university. I've gotten to know so many of the staff so well and so many students over the years as well. So it really feels great to be part of that community. Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody for speaking this evening and sharing your experiences and your stories with us. What I'd now like to do is open up the discussion. If you do have any questions, please do type them in the chat box. I'd like to open the questioning. I know Kaylee has to leave us, I believe, at 6:10, so I know your time is limited. So I'd like to perhaps, hope not being unfair here, Kaylee, but maybe ask you the first question that we've received. Is there anything that has particularly helped you to feel more comfortable in being able to discuss your mental health?
I think part of it is in my nature, to be honest, but in terms of the help, I think it's the environment, and I think the idea of ULaw being this community has helped me massively in comparison to the environment that I was in before. I also think maybe trusting, and I think and that's a hard thing to do, but I think you have to trust in people. And I'm not saying every person that you come across at work, but maybe a select few. And if you can find it within yourself to trust that they will react in the way that will be helpful and support you, then that has sort of helped me open up, I think. And also events like this, and being able, the fact that we our colleagues, one of our colleagues in Leeds, the last few years, Razwana, she has actually just left the university, but she's been wonderful on campus, just talking generally about welfare. And yes, so the environment for sure, but I think it's trust. You have to trust people, I think, and allow yourself to do that.
Right. Thank you, Kelly. I'd like to ask you, Emma, that same question. Anything you found particularly helpful?
I think the first thing for me has been time. I think, even 6 months ago, I probably couldn't have spoken about what I have this evening in the same way. So I think in a lot of situations, it's very true that time is a healer. But I think as well, probably the biggest thing for me has been, I had one very good friend who, anything I told her, she didn't judge me. And I felt that I could go to her with anything. And even in those sort of really difficult times that I described earlier after I had my daughter, things that seemed completely absurd, I felt that she didn't judge me, and it was the same with my partner as well. And I think those two people had a massive impact on me, sort of being able to talk about things openly, and being able to open up to other people as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Emma. Kelly, if I could come back to you, and again, getting the best value for your time before you have to leave, what would be your top recommendations for managing mental well-being while studying?
I absolutely think that a lot of what Daniel said here is massively relevant. So building in time in your day to go for a walk. I make sure I do it now at work in the middle of the day when it's sort of my in between teaching, even if I feel like coming away from my computer is a ridiculous idea. I make myself go for a walk, get the fresh air. The gym for me is it's great for my mind. I don't go for anything else. I don't particularly watch what I eat or anything else, but I go to the gym for my mind. And allowing yourself the socialize, the laughter and the human connection, the feeling you get from that is never going to be replaced with study. Like you have to do that, and it will actually aid your study. It will invigorate your study. So yeah, when you do your revision timetable, build into your revision timetable your time to see family or friends. I always go on my Calm app as well. which I know, Daniel, you mentioned. Every morning for me on the train, I have a 30-minute train journey in. That is my meditation time. And I do that on the way in, and I've done it then, and it massively helps me for the day. So as studying, I would have done all those things as a student. Had I have had the access, the knowledge, and the understanding of what I was going through, I would definitely do those things. And a gratitude list, that is a biggie. I love my gratitude list. Every single day I do make sure I do 5 things on my list, and I don't mean big things, guys. So I don't mean, oh, I'm grateful for my family and I'm grateful for my friends, because then after a day you can't keep writing the same thing. The gratitude has to be for the small things. So I'm grateful for the gentleman that let me sit down on the train the other night. That was a lovely gesture. I'm grateful for, my friend buying me a chocolate bar, or I'm grateful for the fact that my hair managed to go another day without need washing. Like silly things like that. But the small things in life, if you start to learn that those mean so much to you, that everything just seems a little bit more positive.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe if we allow those small things to be more important for us, they take on that significance. Thank you. I don't know, Daniel, if you'd managed to fit everything into your time, if there's anything you'd add to that.
I'll echo Kaylee, who echoed some of what I said. It goes back to that point of having time away, no matter what. And of course, there's going to be times, when you're studying, when you have to do more hours because it's coming up to exam season, but you should never let go of how important the time away is. Apologies, I'm just getting another call. Sorry, that. Can you still see me? Yeah. And one thing, I'm terrible. I know that it goes back to the drinking thing with the coffee. I'm terrible at keeping on top of my water and keep drinking water, and then come 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm dehydrated. But even something as simple as that has helped me. It's made me feel more energized rather than reverting back to the caffeine. And then to go with that, everything else I mentioned before.
Thank you. And you're a dab hand at handling distractions as well, I can see. So that's really impressive. Kaylee, if I could fit in one more question for you, if that's okay, and maybe, I don't know if Patrick would have any comments on this later as well. But a comment I often hear from students is around the lines of, I'm worried about talking about my poor mental health in case it adversely affects my studies or my career. Should I worry about this?
Patrick, if you don't mind if I go first, just in case I do need to nip on. I was actually just typing something in the box in case we didn't get round to anything of a similar theme, because it is something that I've got a lot to say on, but I'll try and keep it short. A lot of my students ask me this, how do I deal with the fact that I've got anxiety, or I don't want to speak to the welfare team or counselling because I don't want a firm to know about it, or I don't want to go to my GP because I don't want it on my record in case a firm will ever know about it. Firstly, services in terms of the GP and counselling, as long as you are safe and other people around you are safe and you're not disclosing something that is of a high concern in terms of your safety, what you discuss with them is what you discuss. Firms are not going to be able to access that information anyway. But secondly, I would say flip the emphasis onto the firm. So we are now talking more openly about mental health. The best way to talk about it in an interview scenario or in an assessment day is to say, I've been on your website and I've seen you've got this, this and this in terms of well-being and support of your staff. Can you explain to me how I can benefit from that? Because like many lawyers, I've suffered anxiety as a student. And I think because it's a big pushing point now, especially with the Mindful Business Charter, firms are saying, we acknowledge this and we are there for you. Then actually, if you make them see that in an interview scenario, if you say, hang on, I've seen this, so this is something that you offer, what can you offer me? that will actually make them see, well, you know, it's not a weakness, this, it's something that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Patrick, is there anything you would add to that?
I think Kaylee's covered it really well. I think it's natural to be concerned about things. We see generally disability and people declaring whether they have a disability or not going into the workplace or elsewhere. We see, so there's a natural concern there. But as you mentioned before, Aidan, sort of 1 in 4 people experience poor mental health at some point. So good universities and employers want to support you, and I suppose have support services, as we've mentioned before, in place to ensure that you sort of can continue in work and with your studies as well, because at the end employers want people to be successful, and they need them to be in work. So I think that support is really important. So I think it's important that they understand your situation, so that they can by understanding it, they can ensure that that support is there, and that they can understand if there are particular points where you can't make it into it. Some things happen. They need to be able to provide that support and that understanding there. And I suppose the big thing for me is that, do you really want to work for an employer who they don't care about this, and it's not important to them, and they don't want to provide that support? I mean, that doesn't want. I don't want that to sound flippant. Having a job is really important. It can be quite difficult to get work, but I think it is an important point as well. And I think Kaylee's mentioned lots of employers now, this is really important to them. So I think it's natural to be concerned, but absolutely it's important to, I think, talk about it.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Kelly. And I think the University of Law plays an important part in our conversations with employers as well, talking to employers about the supports we provide here at the university, but also influencing the profession and putting out messages like you both have just done around the importance of addressing these issues as well, and the impact they can have. Thanks a lot, Kelly. Take care. Bye-bye. Also, Patrick, you raised an interesting point earlier around intersectionality and identities. And, you know, we're made up of so many identities as a student, as an employer, as a father, mother, sister, brother, son, daughter, whatever it might be. So we're not defined by a mental health issue, but by many other things that are in our lives. And I quite liked Kaylee when she mentioned about turning this around and showing it as a strength, and drawing on those strengths, which is, you know, something we can help students do as well in their conversations with us. I don't see any other questions in the chat box, unless I'm missing anything, Jess, but I'd like to ask, open the question really. I mean, what would be your main tip in helping students and staff to start talking about mental health? Maybe Dan, if I could start with that question to you, and then maybe ask Patrick the same question.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Emma and Kaylee have been saying, is, you know, be brave with it. You know, the industry is changing, and it won't be long. It really won't be long until it is recognized the same as a physical health issue, for example. And I also like to help people. So if I see somebody opening up about something, I know it's going to help another person. And I think having that satisfaction that even by talking about yourself, even if it might not mean much to you, can actually have a huge impact on somebody else too. I hope I made myself clear there. Mm-hmm. Like a domino effect, really. So I'd say look at the benefit, not only for yourself, but also for who you could be helping just by voicing it. Because sometimes it only takes one other person to go first, and then suddenly you've got a whole room full of people talking about certain issues. But they would be my main tips, if I've answered the question there.
Great. No, that's fine. Thank you, Daniel. Patrick, is there anything you would add to that?
Very similar. I mean, it's really simple. I think taking time to, you mentioned it right at the start, Aidan, just taking time to ask someone how they're doing, and sort of then taking time to listen to their response as well. And I think the more that we have, I think events like this, I think the university and the student union, we have a role to play to help facilitate conversations as well. And I think an event like this is great in terms of just starting to get people to feel that they're in a safe space where they can start to open up and talk about their experiences. I think goes a long way. So it's really simple. I think taking time to sort of listen to, ask someone how they're doing it, and listening to their response as well. I think you can also, I think there's some excellent resources online as well that can people can tap into, that sort of provides quite a few ideas in terms of how you can go about starting to talk about mental health as well. I think there's some great charities out there that help and support with that.
Great, thank you, Patrick. And I touched on it in my opening remarks around, some of the reasons why people might be reluctant to talk about their mental ill health or any things that they might be finding difficult. Daniel and Emma, in the student union, if you've any thoughts around what might be some of those barriers that prevent people talking about their mental health issues, and how we can overcome those barriers?
I think do you want to go first, Emma?
No, go on, you carry on.
So I think for industries like law and business, where it is that, as a student, it's a high pressure environment, you're going to be working long hours, and especially at the start of your career, you're going to have a lot of pressure on you. And I feel like, having that, even contemplating talking about your mental health, I think for many students, it almost feels like a weakness, and it really, really shouldn't be. Because I mentioned before, most people, even the person who sat across the interview desk from you was probably, a panel of 3 people. There's going to be at least one person in that room statistically who's had poor mental health. It's about recognizing that everybody who in your day-to-day lives had probably experienced that sort of poor mental health in the past. Again, have I answered the question there?
Yeah.
So,
thank you. Yeah.
But it's that stigma. It is that stigma. I think that is probably the biggest barrier. And I think it was Kaylee who mentioned before, we are the next generation. It's only us who are going to be able to change that. It's only us who are coming through the ranks who can go out into the wider world and actually advocate for people speaking up. So let's break those barriers.
I think that's a really important point, Daniel, and thank you for raising that, because my generation and generations have followed me, that those attitudes thankfully are being superseded and overtaken by the younger generation now, who I'm pleased to see have a more open and accepting attitude around a lot of issues. There's still, as you suggested, some work to do, but it's great that there's less resistance to those conversations, and that's really good to see. Emma, what would you like to add to that?
In terms of, I think what stops people from sharing things like that is, at least in my experience, I was always quite ashamed to admit that I was not able to cope. And it goes back to what Kaylee was saying earlier about being, high functioning and being a perfectionist and sort of wanting to make sure that everything is exactly the way that you want it. And I think if you think that you admit those weaknesses, that actually that's a negative thing, but it's actually the complete opposite. And I think by talking about those things, it's not a weakness, it is absolutely a strength. I think as well, people are maybe a little bit worried about the awkwardness of having those initial conversations. I know when I started to sort of open up about things, some people were a little bit sort of not sure what to say. And I think you don't have to say anything. I think just listening is probably the greatest tool that you can employ in those situations. And just think about what you would want to have said to you if you were in that situation. You know, we don't need anything kind of particularly high level or anything like that. I think it's just about thinking about what you would like to have in that situation, and it will benefit you in the long term. Although opening up at the start might seem difficult, in the long term, actually, you will reap those benefits throughout the rest of your career and throughout the rest of your life as well. So it's definitely worth it, although it seems difficult to do so at the start.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. And I think we can often be very critical of ourselves and, be harder on ourselves than somebody else might be in a similar situation. I think that point as well, what would we say to a friend in a similar situation? And we'd be less likely to be as critical of them as we are about ourselves. So I think being a friend to ourselves is a really important thing as well. I was going to ask, why should I talk about my mental health? What good would that do? But I think you've all demonstrated this evening what an important thing it is to do and how it can open those doors to getting advice and support from others as well. And I think another thing that I come across a lot in my line of work is that often we may not see the options that are available to us. So by having that conversation with somebody else, a trusted friend, a family member, or somebody at the university, a professional, etc., it can help us to explore other options and see things in a different way. And I often find that can be very helpful. I know from my own experience at work, I can miss things, and having another perspective on that can help me see those things. And I know it can be the same in terms of accessing support and exploring options and taking things forward. That can be really important as well. There was one other question I wanted to ask, and that was, if a student is worried about another student's well-being, and they may not have the opportunity, or they may be reluctant to discuss it with the particular student for a number of reasons, is there any advice you could give them in that situation? And, Patrick, is there anything you could suggest?
In terms of if someone's worried about someone else's mental health, I think for me it goes back to a lot of what we've been saying this evening. Speaking to them, asking if they're okay, looking to sort of describe any change that you've seen in them and why it's sort of making you, I suppose, concerned for them, and then making suggestions in terms of if they're able to speak to their GP or the wellbeing team or some other sort of support service, and offer to help them, I suppose, in seeking that support as well. So being that Emma talked about having that sort of that friend who's always there for them, I think just being there for them, listening to them, and sort of talking to them and describing what you're seeing and why you're sort of concerned about them, and offering to help and support them if they feel they need it.
Absolutely. I think that's crucially important. And again, it's about being there for them, being open and observant if something is happening that perhaps indicates that student may be struggling, and being a ready listener for them. I'm also pleased that we have a report and support function here at the university that people can access, staff and students can access on Elite in the institutions page under student support services. If there's a reason why that conversation can't take place, and somebody is worried for another's well-being, they can raise their concern through our portal there, either anonymously or by disclosing their own details, but letting us know what's happening, what you've observed, what you're concerned about, and also talking to personal tutor, etc., which is often the first point of contact for our students. Okay, we're coming to the close. I know we haven't involved Jess very much this evening, and Jess provides a very important role here at the university in terms of providing mental health expertise in advising staff to help support our students, but also directly with students as well. Jess, I'd be very grateful perhaps if you could say a few words about the types of support that are available for students through the wellbeing services here at the university.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say it's been really lovely to be a part of this tonight. I know I've been in the back listening in, but it's been really good to hear all your stories and hear you be so courageous to speak about all of them. I know what a brave thing it can be to do that. In terms of the support services at the university, like Aidan said, first point of call for a lot of students is personal tutors, but I'd always just encourage, if there was anyone that you feel comfortable to speak with, then to speak with them, as you know, most university staff know the different support services that are there and can point them in the right direction. For students, you know, there's the welfare team. So if you do have any wellbeing or mental health concerns, then we say go through them, as they can, you know, get someone to speak to you, kind of work out what's going on, and, you know, either refer to the mental health team if that's needed, or, you know, kind of offer different points of call of support as well. There are some, you know, other support services within the student group, which is like the counselling service at University of Law. Students can always self-refer and ask for an assessment, and then they can hopefully offer some short-term counselling support. There's also the Disability Support and Inclusion Service. So if anyone does have a disability, or even if they're just struggling with their mental health, you can, you know, reach out to them and see if there's any support you could get in terms of academic. And then you've also got the money and housing advisors, who are really good in, you know, because as we all know, money stress, housing stress, massive, you know, factors that can impact our well-being and our mental health. They're really good at, you know, providing support around that too. We also do have Together All, which it's a website. If you type in Together and then All, it should come up. And if anyone who's got a university email address can sign up for free. It's like a forum where you can post how you're feeling anonymously, but it's also got some self-help courses, which can be a really good starting point for anyone who's starting to like notice that they're getting more anxious, they're feeling more down. It's even got things that look at like PTSD, negative thinking, managing alcohol, etc. And then we also have the wellbeing app through the University of Law, which can be really good again in providing different resources, so like different podcasts on kind of like meditation, relaxation, helping in exam period. And also it nicely sends you push notifications to help with your self-care and ensure that you're doing it. And then lastly, we also have study skills. So they're there too. They provide one-to-one group supports. Their elite webpage has quite a lot of information on it too, in helping students form that very important study schedule. And a lot of what I talk about with students is that balance, that life and work balance, and that study schedule is very important for that, as well as time management, because as we all know, students as well as staff, we have awful lot going on, lots of things, and we always want to fit it all in, but we need to prioritize that self-care too. I don't think I've missed anything.
Yeah, that's very comprehensive. Thank you very much indeed, Jess. I'd also like to add to that list that we have wellbeing workshops for staff and a series for students as well. Staff get notifications and invites through our Outlook system, and students, if they're interested in accessing our creative wellbeing workshops, there's information again on the institution's page on Elite under student support services. If you scroll down and look for creative wellbeing sessions, the access link is in there, and recordings for the past 2 weeks sessions are available there as well. We've come to the end of our time. I'd like to thank our speakers this evening, again, for sharing such personal insights, experiences and tips, etc., to share with everybody else. Is very much appreciated and very valuable to us here. Many thanks to Patrick for the support that we receive from the executive board as well. That's really important and reassuring for us to know that that's there and that we can approach you and, you know, talk about these things. That's really important for us. Thanks to Jess and the support team as well for the hard work that you do on a daily basis here at the university, supporting staff to support students and supporting students directly. As a university, we support the well-being of all our students, but we also provide that additional support for the mental health and well-being of those students who may be experiencing a range of issues, and we do that through a joined-up, integrated approach to our services. And again, it's fantastic to acknowledge the role of the leadership here at the university in developing and delivering a whole university approach. So talking is good, talking is important. Please don't be fearful of doing that. I'd like to thank the support of the Student Union in putting on tonight's event, and I look forward to lots more working on similar projects going forward. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much indeed. Have a good evening.
Make sure you look at the nice comments that have been put in the chat box before you go. There were no other questions, but very nice messages.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.